Hi, I'm Quinn and I'm autistic, and this is Autistic. If you've even heard of autism, then you know in some fashion that communication difficulties are part of the package. Even someone like me, who's totally comfortable talking on a stage or in front of a camera, has clinically observable communication problems off-screen, if we happen to be autistic. I may look pretty confident and relaxed doing this, but this is a comparatively safe zone for me. I've been doing this for years now, and I'm comfortable being me here, warts and all. There's no airs and graces here beyond the basic social niceties required of a YouTube video. Practical communication barriers come in many forms. Some autistic people barely communicate. No words, no gestures, barely any feedback at all. Others don't or can't use vocal speech but use writing, AAC devices, cards or other methods to communicate, and even those vary between autists who only speak for the essentials and those who like to engage but not with their voices. We don't so often talk about those autists who can't get to shut up though. Some of us never seem to stop, forever filling the silence with words and sounds, but they exist as part of our spectrum too. The vast majority of us, diagnosed and not, lie in between those two extremes, functioning in a manner that allows us to communicate effectively enough, but not well enough to blend into the background as much as we like. Even when we're struggling with other aspects of autism like sensory differences, emotional disparities, or troubles with reconciling different viewpoints, it's our communication that usually sets the trouble in motion. Thing is, when our communication does let us down, folks don't always blow a fuse the instant we put a foot wrong. Apart from a few mardy arses who actually like causing trouble, most folks don't actually want to have disagreements with us. So they'll often at least try to give us a warning. They drop hints, sometimes not very subtle hints, that our communication isn't working the way we want it to. But as I point out over and over again on Autistic, autistic folks like me aren't usually very good at picking up hints, even direct criticism sometimes, because of the same communication barriers stopping people from getting us properly. Stacey's question from a few weeks ago was about one of these warnings, but a slightly cryptic one. Sometimes when Stacey's talking to someone in what she thinks of as a pretty regular, unremarkable manner, they tell her she's being deep. And she was curious what they might mean by that. I think we've all been in similar positions. If we're not being told we're deep, there are other variations. Blimey, you really know this stuff, don't you? You've obviously given this some considerable thought. Well, that's a lot more detail than I was expecting. Well, let's try to answer Stacey's question together. I've got myself a nice hot cup of tea and a comfy chair to sit in, so why not get yourself a cuppa and a comfortable spot to park your butt and join me for a dive into the autistic deep debate. Last week, I told you all a little bit about Delia. Delia's not what most folks expect an autistic person to be, especially not in communication terms. She calls herself a chatty Cathy because she just loves to talk to people about themselves, to find out how they think and feel about the world. She charms just about everyone she meets socially, but even she has huge communication barriers of her own. She wouldn't be able to do this, for instance. She doesn't like being put on the spot, as she puts it, and this is about as spotty as it gets. It doesn't matter if it's an audience of 1 or 1,000,000. She doesn't like feeling on show, so you'll never catch her next to me on screen. But she also crumbles when dealing with authority. She dries up completely and can't even think, let alone speak. She had that with teachers at school, the pastors at her churches, policemen, doctors, anyone with authority and influence over her life. But nobody's ever told her she was deep about anything. That's because Delia's social skills work a little differently to most autists. She learned to keep the subject of conversation focused on other people, so she doesn't have to work out their motivations or opinions to protect herself. Give them enough time and encouragement, and people tell her anyway. She knows that most people are so happy to be given free rein to wax lyrical about their own lives and thoughts on the world, and if she keeps nudging them in the right way, she never has to express any of her own. Ergo, she rarely gets criticised for her opinions, because nobody knows what they are. But are we jumping to conclusions about Stacey's query? Are we being a little biased here and just assuming that comments like the one Stacey's asking about are intended to criticise or to warn? Perhaps they're a compliment, or just an observation. So, what is it about autistic communication that so often prompts people to describe it as deep, whether it's criticism or not? On this channel, we view things through a framework called the Autistic Triad of Distinction. It's a modern-day equivalent to the age-old and outdated Triad of Impairment, but it's about differences, not faults. It's not making value judgments about what makes us different, just acknowledging where those differences lie and working out ways to bridge the gaps between our autistic world and everyone else's. There's an ongoing series about its fundamentals called How I Made Autism Make Sense, which I'll link above. Our primary differences from everyone else fall into three broad categories: emotional processing, sensory processing, and a heightened need for clarity and consistency we call our sense of veracity. And it's that sense of veracity which is probably the biggest contributor to us coming across as deep, but not the only one. It's veracity that drives autistic folks to be creatures of habit and routine, to often favour familiarity over novelty, and to both ask too many questions and to misunderstand the answers we're given. It's often on full display whenever someone thinks we're being rigid, thinking only in black and white, or being pathologically resistant to demands. Internally, it manifests as a fundamental need for things to be consistent and reliable, for truth to be trustworthy and based upon facts, and for people to mean what they say. Sadly, we don't live in a world where those are a given anymore, if we ever did for that matter. I made a video a while back about the difficulty many autistic people have when asked to answer graded questions, those multiple choice questionnaires that ask you to rate your feelings, your opinions, or your satisfaction. Not only do they clog up your email after you buy anything online, but they're also the backbone of most diagnostic processes, including those for autism. Veracity drives us to understand the workings of systems rather than take them for granted. We're not thinking in black and white, as boomer psychiatrists once told us. We're drowning in endless shades of grey, and it's this that can make us come across as deep. It's why every week there are detailed, well-observed comments on my videos stretching to hundreds, sometimes thousands of words long, and novella-length emails in my inbox. On the whole, we're detail people, and it's important in our decision-making. Vital, in fact. I have a pretty high sense of veracity compared to most autistic people, but even I have to take a step back from some folks, like Terry I mentioned last week. Terry's sense of veracity makes me look like an amateur in the pedantry and candid criticism stakes, believe me, but mine's more than enough to get me into trouble. Something else that'll get me in trouble is being homeless and hungry, which is where I would be if it weren't for my patrons. I don't do corporate sponsors, and this channel and my writing are my only income, so I rely on the generosity of strangers to pay my bills via Patreon, Ko-fi and YouTube thanks. If you can afford to bung me a few quid to keep food in my belly and content keep flowing, then there's links in the description, and I don't need to tell you how much of a boost every subscription, like and notification click makes. Well, I don't need to tell you, but I did anyway. And I put a big green pointy animation on screen too. I'm not very good at this subtly begging for support lark, am I? Oh, and if you see a hype button, do press it a few times for me if you can. Don't forget that all paid patrons get an extra weekly video with every tea time video made now, and we decided together that from now on they'll go up on Wednesdays to break up the week between my YouTube videos on the weekends. As I just said, I'm nothing compared to Terry in the Veracity stakes, but it's still one of my biggest sources of stress and misunderstandings. For Terry, it's sounding too certain that gets people's backs up, even though he's usually right about things. For me, it's almost the opposite. I work things out in real time, verbally, which makes me sound terribly uncertain. Most of it goes on silently in my head, but some of it trips off my tongue because I have to play for time. It's the only way I can hold a real-time conversation with someone unfamiliar. If I don't at least partially vocalise some of my thoughts, then the awkward silences whilst I weighed things up would kill any conversation dead. Why? Well, because I don't really have opinions in the sense most people expect me to. I have unresolved questions with shifting potentials, a set of mental leaderboards in perpetual motion whilst I go through the lifelong process of making my autistic mind up. When you ask me for an opinion, you're asking me how I feel about something, and that can be a difficult question for me on many levels, but there's two factors in particular. Now, if you have an Amazon Echo device within earshot, now's your chance to mute it or turn the mic off. I'll put a bit of lift music up or something for a few seconds. Okay? Right. Like at least half of autistic people, I'm alexithymic, which means that at least half of autistic people have as much trouble expressing opinions as I do. That may sound rich coming from this side of the camera on a channel full of opinions, but like I said earlier, I have my communication problems too, and sitting here isn't one of them. Alexithymia is best described as a disconnect with our feelings in the moment. In some cases, we feel everything, but we have difficulty expressing those feelings in a meaningful way. Other times, our feelings sink out of view the more stressed we become until we reach a critical point and poof, they evaporate. When people think we're being cold, insensitive, or robotic, that's what's going on. Stress is pushing our feelings out of reach, so sometimes we are disconnected from emotion and operating on a more logical, systems-based level at that point. Our feelings are still there, still happening, but in the background, are being stashed away in our subconscious for later. Everything you say to us in the heat of the moment, even if it appears to bounce off us at the time, will come back to bite us in the arse, and you, days, weeks, maybe even years later. If we're already stressed, unwell, or confused, then just the act of putting us on the spot with a weighted question might be enough to push us over the edge into robot mode, or at least make opinions harder to form, because it triggers alexithymia. So, with stress making our feelings increasingly inaccessible, what do we turn to? Veracity. We look for consistency, trends, potential links between disparate facts, and we try to form or match truths to the facts available to us. And we do that in real time, every time someone asks us an opinion, to explain something, or even to answer that most commonplace of inquiries. Why did you do that? All that mental gymnastics is going on behind my eyes when someone asks me to answer any question to which there isn't a clear, factual answer. It's like the difference between asking me what time it is over whether it's time for tea. I can look at the clock over there, my watch, or even the microwave in the kitchen to find out the time, and if I want to be exact to Greenwich time code, I can check my phone. But when is tea time? Well, this is Tea Time with Quinn. So it's now, obviously, but I don't know where on the clock or the calendar you're watching this. But in the UK at least, most people think of tea time as a fixed point in their day. Tea time often marks the transition from afternoon to evening for many of us, so when exactly is that? Fans of Noel Coward might say 4 p.m. is when everyone stops for tea, but that was a bit of an upper crust colonial conceit. Where my dad came from in the working class Midlands, tea wasn't just a tasty, refreshing cuppa, it was the main evening meal. Your meat and 2 veg, your fish and chips, or if you were totally Veracity, your bread and dripping with sugar on top. It was the most substantial meal of the day and the one which brought the family together. When I was growing up, tea time was about 5:30 because it revolved around my dad getting home from work. When I was commuting 3 or 4 hours a day to work myself, my tea time was around 7 or 8 p.m. And these days of working from home, I try to get food on the table by 6 p.m. So, right now, the time I'm recording this, it's 4:44 in the afternoon, and according to that little logo up there, it's tea time with Quinn. But even ignoring that, I'm drinking tea, so this could be tea time on 2 counts, but I won't be eating my tea, my evening meal, for hours yet. Just asking me, is it tea time yet, opens up a whole heap of contextual possibilities just within my own definition of understanding of what tea time means, even before we get into what you actually meant when you asked me the question. If it gets that complicated asking me whether it's tea time, you wait till you ask me for an opinion about politics, religion, or what my favourite movie is. You'll be here forever, because I don't know all the answers, but I'm very good at exploring possibilities. So, to give me time to try and work out what you mean by tea time, I may well mention to you that I only drink tea as a cuppa these days. I used to drink black coffee like a Swede, but I suddenly went off coffee a while back. I still don't know why that is. Same thing happened with alcohol a few years ago. I just suddenly stopped fancying it. I haven't since. I wonder why that is. I'm saying all that to fill the dead air because I'm trying to work out what exactly tea time means. And I'll tread conversational water like that for as long as I have to work it out. Or until I realise that I could just tell you the time and let you decide if it's tea time or not. The problem I and so many autistic people have is that either alexithymia or heightened veracity can make answering opinion-based questions difficult for us, and lots of us have to deal with both. I'm not the only one who muses on the nature of seemingly tangential things to buy myself time to think, and it's not the only trick up our sleeves. Feigning deafness or... what was I saying? Oh yeah, feigning deafness or distraction is a good tactic for buying a few more seconds of processing time, and fake forgetfulness or naivety can stretch the thought window out too in a pinch. They work best on strangers though. When we're with people we're more settled with, familiar folks we expect to know us a little better, we're far more likely to do a bit of thinking aloud. And that's where those, "wow, that's a bit deep" comments most often come out. Those moments when we're thinking aloud, buying ourselves a little time, but also including you in our thought processes. By vocalising our thoughts, we're being vulnerable in front of you and demonstrating trust. By showing you that we don't have a fixed opinion, we're inviting you to help us out a bit, to clarify the context of your question to make it easier for us to answer, give us a bit of back and forth before you ask us to commit, or just back off if the question isn't important. Sometimes, often in my case, we'll ask you to clarify directly with probing questions of our own, but that can lead us down a different path of doubt, not one for today. This is the deep debate, not the accidentally starting arguments or the bogus demand avoidance debate. But that's our side of the story. What's going on in the other side? What are folks thinking when they say, "wow, that's pretty deep"? There's no doubt that it could be a positive observation. Obviously, what we said was unexpected, but they want to convey their respect for our knowledge, for the intricacy of our arguments for and against, or for our willingness to broaden our horizons and embrace doubt. Or they could just be telling us to hurry up. Stacey asked if perhaps they meant be shallow, and in a manner of speaking, maybe she's right. Not completely, but certainly contextually. Because most often this is about depth in context. An autistic context is almost always more complicated than the average Joe in the street. Most people don't have to compensate for alexithymia, heightened veracity, sensory triggers, or any other of the complications that can make autistic communication a potential minefield. But they also don't have to work out their opinions on the fly either. That's a very autistic thing. Like all autistic traits, it's not exclusive to us, but it's an essential for an autism diagnosis. Average Joes, normal people, or neurotypicals, it doesn't matter what terminology you prefer. People who aren't autistic see the world differently to those of us who are. Other neurodivergent people often have overlap with us, but our experience of thought and feeling and the sensory impressions we get of the world are furthest from those who feel the most secure and at home in society. Most people don't have to work things out like we do, because they can do something many autistic people find difficult or even impossible. Most average Joes are capable of making assumptions. And they can do it even when there's little to no additional data to base them on. They have an almost magical skill that allows them to generalise and file information, opinions, and even people, saving them valuable seconds in every interaction. It's a survival skill that removes the need to think or work things out under pressure. They can just act, while someone like me is still frozen in indecision. It's part instinct, part savvy, part learned skill. Neither way is better in the long run, because you're weighing up the value of rapid decisive action over patient-considered evaluation, and both can fail just as spectacularly if applied at the wrong time. When people express surprise at how deep we're being, how much detail we're going into, or how far back in the story we've gone to establish where we are in the here and now, 9 times out of 10 they're asking us to hurry up. They're not necessarily uninterested in what we have to say. In fact, they might actually be thrilled to pick up on it later, but not now, not in this moment. Right now, they just want a quick answer to what, in their minds at least, is a simple question. So, how do we get round this little communication barrier? From the non-autistic side of things, I can only ask everyone to be a bit more aware of the difficulty a lot of autistic people have answering opinion-type questions and try to make it a bit easier on us. Try to make questions simple and factual if it's at all possible. But if there has to be an emotional, opinion-based element, try to give us as much context as you can and limit the options on the table to as few as possible. Also, be ready to explain the odd incongruity from our perspective and be as patient as you can afford to be. For most of us, it's not that we can't do it, we just take longer to get there. For us autistic folks, a lot of us are already doing the best we can, but there might be the odd thing we can do to ease things over. I'm not going to suggest you stop using verbal delaying tactics that have got you this far. In fact, if I've mentioned any you've not thought of before, then add them to your arsenal. But at the same time, take on board that a statement like, "Wow, that's a bit deep," is a hint that we need to wrap up soon. That's not always going to feel possible to us, especially when we already feel misunderstood. But carrying on regardless will only make things harder in the long run. Frustrated people very quickly turn into angry people if not paid attention to. These days, I'm just straight about it. If someone doesn't already know I'm autistic, I won't necessarily tell them there and then, but I usually couch it in mildly apologetic terms. I'm sorry, but I really don't have a strong opinion on that. I'd have to give it some thought and get back to you. That often gets me off the hook, and quite honestly, most people aren't bothered enough to come back to me later. I'm not sure. What do you think? Sometimes works. And if we're not that bothered about the answer, we can just nod and go along with it if we choose. Of course, no method is foolproof, because none of us can count on never meeting a fool, or angry people, hurt people, depressed people, desperate people, narcissists, egomaniacs, or occasionally people who care about us and respect us, but they really do need an answer quickly and they can't afford to wait while we go through our process. What do we do then? Closest I've got to an answer there is blunt honesty. This is sometimes the moment I choose to disclose. I know you need a quick answer. I'm autistic and I can't make decisions like that under pressure. I need time to think about it. But if you really need an answer now, please help me out. And if even that fails, you have my full, unequivocal blessing to melt the f*** down. If there's one theme that runs through all of my work on Autismatic, it's that the problems autistic people face in our contemporary world can't be solved in isolation. Unfortunately, the goals that we're aiming for aren't always consistent with everyone else in our lives. Most autistic people are just trying to lead our best lives in whatever way we can, without treading on anyone else's toes in the process. We're seeking a peaceful life, free of unnecessary conflict, along with a reasonable set of assumptions that we can rely on. People and institutions we can trust, a steady income that meets our living needs, and a familiar, safe home base to lead our lives from. But the prevailing view from society at large is that we're a problem needing a solution. Making provision for different minds and varying sensitivities is too much work when you can just tell us we're all defective and build a cure narrative around us, just like they have with so many other minorities. Autistic advocates, writers, creators, and social media influencers are all trying to achieve the same thing: to shift that societal view of deficit and inconvenience to one more like the reality we live every day of our autistic lives. It's difficult for us to reach anyone outside this bubble of existing neurodiversity acceptance, but we do manage it. For every clever dick who tries to get the R word past the YouTube comment filters or tells me I'm talking out of my arse, there's at least 2 or 3 messages from folks who've discovered their own neurodivergence here, or who learn valuable lessons to help the autistic and neurodivergent people they live with, work with, and above all, care about. If we didn't still have a long way to go, then I wouldn't have made this video and you wouldn't be watching it. But after 42 years of watching and living the reality of diagnosed autistic life, we have already come a long way to get where we are now. Best keep at it until we finish the journey, eh? Thank you to everyone who contributed to the conversation about Stacey's question from a few weeks ago. There was some tremendous insight in those replies and a lot of compassion too. I like to see both, and I learn from all the answers you give. Those of you who wrote to me directly have been even more helpful, often giving me access to thought processes I doubt I'd be allowed if we didn't share an autistic view of the world together. I have gathered so much useful info on the subject of competition too, both in a formal and less formal sense, and I'll compile that into at least one video coming up. You can keep the competition and games feedback coming too, though, if you've got more to add. I'm interested in how we feel about competing with other people and whether our approach to competition has limited our options in life, and you've been really forthcoming. The same applies to our other current topic of handling our own errors and the consequences of our mistakes, which I'd like to add a little bit more to now. What about mistakes you were definitely responsible for, but which happened due to someone else's bad advice, or your own naivety? I mean, you do something for good reason, only to find out the reason you relied on was bogus. Do you handle things like that any differently? And whilst what I'm about to say isn't a research topic per se, I'd really appreciate your input into something which isn't really my field of expertise. One of my patrons is looking for resources about autism and menopause. So if you have any links, book titles, writers, research papers, anything in mind that you think she might find useful, please pop it in the comments or message me directly. Just be aware that YouTube automatically filters out all comment posts with URLs in them. So if you don't see your comment immediately after posting it, it's because it's gone into comment limbo waiting for me to OK it, and I will do it. That's if you put a link in there. On Wednesday's Patreon video, I'll be talking about something very recent in my life that illustrates some of what I've been talking about today, along with comment follow-up and general personal nonsense. So, until next week here, or Wednesday if you're a patron, I'm Quinn, and I'm autistic. Thank you for watching. For every clever dick who tries to get the R word past the YouTube comment filters or tells me I'm